Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. It's nice to have you on board tonight. I know we're taking up everybody's time on this Tuesday evening. As an introduction, my name is Derek Turner. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Collaborate Dental. With me tonight is Sunita Jordan, who's the ex-legal lead at the BDA, who will be presenting most of the presentation tonight, which is on optimizing your practice. So I'm just going to hand over to Sunita and let people come in as they sort of log into this presentation. It is recorded tonight, just to let everybody know. So if you have any objections to being recorded, maybe have your screens off and your microphone off. We will be asking for any questions at the end of the presentation. So if you can keep them to the end, that'd be great. And maybe if we could just have the questions as just a hand up in the notes, and then I shall read them out loud at the end. And then between Sunita and myself, we will try and answer them as best as we can. So without any further delay, I'll introduce you to Sunita. Sunita, welcome. Thank you for presenting tonight, and over to yourself.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know it's been probably a long day at work, a long, wet, damp, miserable day at work, and you're probably the first thing you want to do is just probably switch on your next box set that you might want to watch instead of listening to me. But I'm going to try and just give you a little bit of an outline of how to optimize your practice with just team performance management. So just sort of on a more positive note than sort of telling you something a little bit more negative or something that you must do or whatever. These are just sort of strategies to help you kind of build a team and build up your performance management. So without further ado, why should you, sorry, actually my thing's not working at the moment. Let me just try it again. Yeah. Why manage your performance? What's the point of managing your performance? Well, firstly, it's to build a stronger team, because if you have a more effective and a more efficient team, you have a stronger team because everybody's pulling their weight and doing things together, and everyone's doing what they need to do in order to have an effective team. So it does build a stronger team by managing your performance. And consequently, it gives you a happier workplace because morale is up, everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, nobody's lagging behind, or nobody's pulling more weight than they should. So having a happier workplace is a very, very important part of it, obviously. But probably most of all, managing performance in a team is teaching you to be a better leader, because I think most dentists would come out of dental school probably not really learning much about leadership. Ironically, it's part of the GDC standards for the dental team to have strong leadership in a workplace or in dental practices. It's also a very strong requirement that there should be strong communication skills in dentists, but it's not really taught in dental school. So you're basically coming out of dental school expecting to be leaders, and people are expecting you to be leaders because you immediately might start owning a business, or you might be a team leader in a practice, so through clinical leadership or whatever it may be. But you haven't really been trained to do that. So it's actually quite an it's a very, very essential thing that actually is lacking in the education. So leadership is also, the other thing about leadership is that it's a very important part of CQC as well. It's one of the it is the fifth element of the CQC checks, which is that the practice is being well led. And actually, we're going to come to CQC in a second, actually, because it's going to be more and more important to show a bit more about all the sort of evidence that you need to have for CQC. So I will actually just touch on that in a minute, just because there's also some updates about that. And then lastly, you manage performance because you can. It's one of the things that you can do as a leader. So whether you're a manager or you're a practice owner. And it is one of the things that you can actually do. There's not that many legal elements that are positively things that a manager or practice owner can do. Most of the time, the employee has a stronger weight in law anyway, and there's very, very few things employers can do in order to proactively make stronger teams. So definitely this is one of the things you can do and you should. Now, leadership and communication skills, what are they? According to an American study about leadership in dental practice, leadership and communication skills are the skills required to provide effective patient care within a successful business. Now, that's kind of a lot of sort of jargon in one sentence, but really what it means is that you have a social or an influential process occurring in your group, which is your team. It's an ability or an art or a skill that leads to goal attainment. And it's also a regulatory problem-solving process that infers sustainability, dependability, and predictability. Now, I mean, all of those things are they're just words thrown up in the air, but we kind of need to know exactly how that might work. Now, I was saying before about CQC being a very important part of this. As most of you may know, the CQC framework is changing, or it has actually already changed at the end of last year, but it's going to basically come into force now, especially for dentists. It's in the spring of this year. And so it's a single framework where basically all healthcare professionals are going to be judged on the same basis. But more importantly, it's not going to be judged anymore on just an inspection, which is what most dentists have been used to, really. And in the past, historically, only 10% of dental practice have actually been inspected. So that's going to change completely, really, where what's going to happen now is that there'll be an online portal where dental practices will be expected to load all their evidence onto this portal, and it'll be a continual basis of judging how good your practice is in terms of keeping up to date with all the 5 qualities that you're required to have. They'll look at a lot of it will be based on feedback from your patients as well as your staff. So your leadership and communication skills are going to be a very, very important part of that, because as I said, being well led is one of the 5th elements of the CQC regulations. But what they're going to be doing is constantly asking your staff how you are doing as a leader in terms of actually judging that 5th element. So being a good leader and communicating well with your team is going to be more and more important, or more important than ever. So how do you communicate? I think actually one of the best and most effective ways to communicate regularly is through daily huddles. Some practices have it, but a lot don't, really. And a daily huddle is just a 5-minute gathering where the clinician, the nurse, and say the receptionist get together to figure out what's going to happen that day, whether who's booked in, how long maybe appointments are, whether they're for the right amount of time. Possibly one patient might need a bit more time. Patient might be particularly nervous. There might be various things that the receptionist might need to know about the patient. The nurse can get an opportunity to check whether lab work has come in for a particular patient. So all these little things that can easily be done in a daily huddle. All too often I see practices where the dentist will come in at 5 to 10 when the first patient is at 10 o'clock. That's too late, really, because everybody has already been there before, is already there earlier. The dentist comes in right at the end. It's all a bit of a chaos. It's all a bit of a mess. And everybody starts off on the wrong note. So it's always best to just have a 5-minute daily huddle to just discuss everything and iron out any problems before they occur. Weekly staff meetings. These are also an essential one. They don't need to be long. They can just be a half an hour staff meeting on a Monday morning, for example, to basically give staff an idea of what might be happening that week, what's important to be happening that week, what, there might be equipment repairs, or might be building works, or there might be all kinds of things that are happening, or training, or anything like that, which staff all need to know about. It's a very good way to communicate with everybody. It's a good way to get everybody together. You could always just have a little bit of breakfast whilst you're having your staff meeting. It's a nice way to bond. So I would definitely recommend a weekly staff meeting. Again, it's going to be one of the things that the CQC will look at in terms of how you communicate with your staff. So they will look at things like meetings, your meeting agendas, or memos that you might have created after your meetings. Regular appraisals is a very, very important one. Again, part of the CQC. So that means that you have maybe 6 monthly appraisals with all your staff to identify things like gaps in training, or maybe even trying to get a little bit more of an opinion from staff as to how they are feeling, how they might be coping with work, whether there's any problems arising. It's also a very good way to pick out things that might be going wrong before they have gone wrong. So a regular appraisal is a really, really important part of the whole employment status, the whole employment contract. And also it's informal chats, which is obviously going to be something that you hopefully regularly do. So those are the sort of informal parts of things, the daily huddles, weekly staff meetings. You might also want to do formal, sorry about this. Bear with me for a second. So you might also need to have formal ways of communicating. That is also an informal chat, could be a more formal way of communicating with your staff, especially when there are specific issues that have arisen. Maybe they're performance relating issues. So things that you might not be particularly happy about. Say, for instance, if someone's coming in late, you're getting someone who's constantly in late, you might have an informal chat, which is not as positive as the informal chat on the other column. If performance related issues become worse, or there is actually some proper misconduct that is occurring, you will probably need to have formal disciplinary procedures. Now, this is something that I really emphasize when I have my training courses. I train practice managers on how to manage their practices effectively. And one of the things that I really emphasize is the formal disciplinary procedure, because it's one of the things that is not used nearly enough in most dental practices, because it's uncomfortable, it's awkward. People don't want to do it because usually they're very small practices. Managers and leaders know their staff very well. They're all probably quite they feel quite friendly towards them. Sometimes it feels like a little family. You don't want to be disciplining people in your family. So it's a very awkward thing that that people just try and avoid as much as possible. But unfortunately, what happens is when you let things go, and if say, for instance, there has been performance that needs to be managed and it isn't, it can just keep going on and on and on. And by you not doing anything, it can affect the morale of the other staff. It can start becoming frustrating, it can start becoming annoying. It can mean that someone actually just blows their cool and shouts something, which then ends up becoming even a worse situation. So formal disciplinary procedure is something that, again, employers and managers can use as a tool. So it definitely must be used as a tool, because it's not just some way of beating somebody with a stick. It's a way of actually improving performance and improving staff morale as a consequence. So it definitely has to be used more often than it is at the moment. Likewise with grievance meetings, grievances are one of the things that would be part of a contract of employment. So you always have the disciplinary procedure, but you'd also have the grievance procedure. So it means that if a staff member is not particularly happy with something that is happening in the practice, or maybe the way they're being treated, or all kinds of things, they can raise a grievance with you, and you would have a proper procedure for dealing with that grievance so that it's sorted out before it builds into something far worse. With all your formal communications, do put them in writing and on record, because it may be that you have a formal chat with someone or an informal chat with someone, but it constantly happens. There isn't any record of that. So do have it in writing, because it'll help you in the long run if unfortunately eventually you might decide to terminate a contract. But all of this is part of a totally different webinar altogether, which maybe we'll do in the future. So it is a big subject on its own, but this is just a quick summary of formal communications. Now, staff training and development, again, this is a very important aspect of the GDC standards for the dental team, that staff are trained and developed. So, like I said before, regular appraisals will identify what the training needs are and what staff might want as training needs. It may not be something that is purely essential. It could be something like languages, if there may be patients in the practice who are of a particular who speak a particular language, and the staff member has expressed a desire to learn that language. So it could be other training needs that are not necessarily part of the formal CPD. Training and development increases staff morale, because basically what you're doing is investing in the staff, and you're saying that I feel that you are that you are good enough to spend some money on, which is just the basics of it. So having staff training and development increases staff morale, and thereby increases staff efficiency, staff team building, staff bonding. Make your staff training an opportunity to build and share skills. So lots of people within the team will have different skills that they might have. Again, they might have different language skills. They might have training that they have done themselves, which they could share with the team. So you could have all kinds of events where you maybe have a lunch and learn, so that if someone's been on a training course, they could have a lunch and learn with the rest of the team to share what they have actually learned. It again enforces whatever they've learned, reinforces whatever they've learned, and it also gives them a little bit of responsibility. So it's a nice way to kind of build a bit of morale. And it's also a way to have fun. So the training methods that you can have, I've kind of gone the wrong way around in terms of the animation, sorry, but you could have external training, which is obviously online external CPD, in-person CPD. So basically the core training that you could have once a year, which is usually a full day's kind of core skills training. You could have obviously formal qualifications if you have trainee nurses who are then going through a formal nursing training. You could have things like telephone skills, and hospitality training, which I think are probably the most essential things, obviously, for receptionists to have. And a lot of the time when we recruit, we tend to recruit someone who might be experienced in the dental industry rather than someone who might be more skilled in hospitality giving, because that's really what you want out of a good receptionist, someone who's friendly and who's hospitable and who has good skills in terms of making people feel welcome and at ease. So telephone skills and hospitality training are a good one to look up. Also getting external dentists to come in and give a talk, for example, on what they might be doing. So you might have, if you have a specialist practice, you might have external specialists who could come in and tell you what they do as a periodontist, what they might do as an endodontist, so that again, it builds up the knowledge. And a receptionist would be a little bit more confident to know when somebody phones them up and says, do you have a periodontist in-house or anything like that? So just giving extra information to people in different ways. In-house, you can have obviously group training days where you might have sort of CPR training coming in, or any number of training methods that would be in-house. Like I said before, you could have a member of staff to give a presentation. They could actually, a member of staff could actually give a small, quick presentation on what they do in a day. So a day in the life of the dental nurse, which actually I think is quite a nice way to tell everybody what really a dental nurse's day is like. So receptionists might not actually know really how a dental nurse operates. So those sort of things are quite a nice idea to do. You could also have the dentists in-house or suppliers coming in to demonstrate their new technologies or their methodologies. So there are plenty of ways in which to make training a little bit more exciting and fun. Other team building and morale giving examples could be staff lunch areas where people do get together to have lunch and they can chat and get to know each other. Team building days, which most practices have once a year, where you might go out for whatever, it might be paintballing or bowling or golf or whatever the case may be. So team building days, which you kind of need to make quite inclusive if possible, so that everybody might want to actually participate in it. Just the basics, having honest communication, like I said, dealing with grievances effectively, giving positive feedback. Again, like I said before with CQC, the feedback is going to be a very, very important element of how they will be judging practices in the future. So getting feedback from patients, getting feedback from staff, getting feedback from stakeholders is all going to be part of the CQC inspection model. So always give positive feedback to staff. So if a patient has come in and said, "Oh, that was fantastic. I really had a great experience today. Your staff are lovely. They're really friendly." Give that back. Tell your staff that that's what the feedback has been. So you might tend to get into the habit of just only giving negative feedback, but the positive feedback is a very morale boosting act. Have social events and networking, especially with referral dentists. It's essential really to have social events and networking. But often what ends up happening is that it's just the clinicians who are part of the social event. So it might just be the dentist. But I feel that it's nice to have your practice manager involved in the social network and the social event and networking, because practice managers can talk to other practice managers and maybe share information and really collaborate. So it's actually a very nice thing to do, to have your staff involved in the networking and social events. Obviously, your practice has to promote a culture of tolerance in the practice. So in terms of ensuring that you are treating people on an equal basis, but the tolerance has to come with some boundaries. So you also have to have obviously policies that dictate what is to be done in certain circumstances. So it's all a bit of a balance. Now, the other way of performance management is through metrics and measurements. And I'm going to pass over to Derek again, actually, who's going to take over this bit of it. So over to you, Derek.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Sunita. And I'm just going to share my screen. Beg your pardon. Okay. So really, as Sunita's sort of given a great overview there of a couple of the modules that Collaborate Dental actually assist practice owners or practice principals with. Really, we touched on their tips and insights into both HR and actually into the compliance side of things with the CQC. The last thing we really want to touch on, and apologies, it's just a sort of a 2-minute example for everybody out there, but really what we're keen to do as well is show how the title, obviously, this presentation is about optimizing your practice, and we've gone through almost the tools and tips on how to optimize your team. But then it's really a case of how do we optimize the numbers? And this is just a quick 5-minute demonstration, something that we're really excited about. We launched now, actually at the beginning of the year, this new tool with the practices that are involved with us and pay a relatively small monthly membership, all actually dive into an electronic Power BI dashboard, which I'm just going to quickly demonstrate for you now, which is something that we really value and have the opportunity to sit down with principals on a weekly occurrence and actually review their numbers so they understand what the performance is of their practice, what the trigger points are, what we can do to change performance, both good and bad, and then what the anticipated result is. So I'm just going to flick through it for a couple of minutes just to give you an example of what can be done regarding the numbers at your practices. So this is just an example practice. So apologies, some of the data, if you like, is missing. I can explain why some of it is, etc., and some of it isn't. But we see here on page 1, this is looking at business intelligence, and we're looking at your available hours for your clinicians and your worked hours, and then what the variances are. And the great thing about this tooling here is you can see at the top here where I'm highlighting, we've got the opportunity to drill down by year, by month, even by week if we want to be getting to the small print. We can also drill down by clinician. So if you want to look at the performance of an individual clinician that you might be having issues with, then we can actually drill down to that. And we can also drill down by role, both like dentist, specialist, hygienist, or other. So we can really take the information that we're trying to produce for the practices down to a granular level. And just as a quick example here, I can show you if I flick this into maybe if I actually deleted January and wanted to see for the whole year. So now we're just going to clear sections. So then it would give us the data for the full year, and we could drill down, or we could drill down by week. If I wanted to drill into a section, I could maximize the section up and expand it, so I could actually drill down into it more. So each practice that we deal with has a dashboard that is specific to their practice and to their KPIs, which we have a conversation with. This one here is, we can say we're looking at hours, we're looking at number of opportunities for forward bookings, and what the trend is for number of appointments against number of bookings, because we're trying to funnel in the habit in the practices of making sure that at reception we're trying to request that the patient books prior to leaving. And then we down the bottom here, we're looking at conversion rates as well for referrals coming in. So we're looking at business to customer. We're also looking at business to business if you're a referral site, and what your conversion rates are as referrals come in, conversion rate from lead to consultation and from consultation to treatment. So we can have a look and see where your best referrals are coming from. Just flicking through, I'm conscious I don't want to take too much of your time on this evening, but again, so here we can see we're looking, this is an NHS practice as an example, so we can have a look at the number of patient growth we've got. We can divide this down at the top here, So we've got active NHS patients. We can have a look at planned patients we can track, private patients we can track, total patients, and then we move on to lapsed. And we've also got inactive patients we track. We can also track things like debt on a weekly occurrence, depending on the software that you've got, your PMS system, obviously, the likes of SOE. We can then break that down into debt that's like less than 30 days, 30 to 60, etc. On this example, it's a dentally site, so we can only extract that data as a whole figure rather than divided down as we see there. So we can run through this. We look again at business intelligence. We look at your marketing. So we look at what your recall success is and your systems in place for recalls, both for dentists and hygienists. Again, we can break this down granularly by the date if we want, or by the clinician, or by the week. We look at new patients in, and again, we break that down. So we have a look and see how many patients have we had. Again, as a dentally practice, this is done on a once a month basis, but we can do this weekly in some PMS systems like Exact. And we look at where the source of those new patients are. So we can divide it down into whatever that source may be. As an example here, friends and family. We've then got press, etc., etc. Next one being online booking, etc. So we can take it down. As an example as well, we look at your social media. So we look at your Facebook, your Instagram, other followers, and we track that, and then your website performance and your Google business reviews. So we're pulling together a picture of the performance of your practice all in one spot, so that when we discuss your performance each week, we can focus down onto one source of information, being this dashboard, rather than flicking between your PMS system and some marketing information and some other types of your compliance information and your HR information. We bring all of that together, so we've got the information in one spot, and we can have a detailed, comprehensive conversation about the performance of your practice. Beg your pardon. So again, we move on to team. I'm not going to go through it in details, but we look at your clinical hours available when you're talking about your performance. We have a look at your support staff, which then defers over here to the left to what your staff ratio is. And depending on how you want to staff your practice, obviously it's something that we monitor. What percentage of clinical staff do you want to support staff? Something we monitor. Also your staff hours down the bottom here, whether it be sickness, holiday, and if you've got any agency staff spend as well. So again, all things key when tracking the performance and optimizing the business performance of your dental practice. So again, we get into the financials, and I'm not going to dwell too much on it, but again, we have a look at your income, whether or not it's an NHS practice. We can have a look at your UDA delivery, and then we split your income down again into two KPIs, looking at it by hour and by appointment, and we track that to see whether or not we're getting growth in either of those as well. And then final page, without me talking too long, is actually looking at your financials. So with the old adage that income's for show and profit is for dough is something that we take very seriously. So we have a look at your income, split down your major costs there, as you can see, your associate costs, your lab bills, materials, staff costs, and then what your profit is. And we have a discussion on that on a regular basis to see how we're actually changing that, what we can do regarding both maximizing income, but also having a look at costs and seeing what we need to control to what degree to actually ensure that your profit is running at the best way. So that's really just a quick sort of 3-minute sort of presentation on a dashboard, which is something what we deliver to a number of practices now. It's just been launched. It's at a very competitive rate of around about £195 a month, whereupon you can have the dashboard and digest the information yourself. If you want us to talk to you about it and take you through the performance and proposed actions, then there's an additional fee for that. But basically, as I said, it starts at £195. The only other thing I'd maybe say is I'd direct you, if I could, just for the last 60 seconds or so, to our website. Sunita's been through some fantastic points tonight. But on our website, here at the top here, there's a business scorecard that if you dived into that, and down the bottom, it lets you register, and it takes you straight into an electronic scorecard where it'll take you 10 minutes to complete. but at the end of it, it'll throw out a very detailed analysis of your practice on your strengths and weaknesses and areas that you could focus on. We're more than happy sort of diving in there, doing that, and obviously having the report. We'd love for you to come back to us and have a conversation and talk to us about how we can help you actually optimize your business the best way possible. Really, in a nutshell, on what we do now, whether or not you're in a position where you're setting up a squat, purchasing as a practice, or even just growing your practice or transforming it, maybe from private to NHS. We've got experience in sort of all of these situations at the moment with existing practices who are trying to do one or the other, or a multitude of those. As an example, we've got a practice converting from NHS to private who are also going through a transition in leadership from father to son. So we're maximizing that for them and planning out their journey. But to summarize, whatever your visions and ambitions and goals are, we can support you, whether it's financial planning, budgeting, operational performance, compliance, HR, recruitment, and marketing. I'd like to say that we're here to help. We're dental experts. We've all been in the field for a very long period of time. My operational background is a corporate dentistry one where I've been chief operating officer of James Holland Associates and managing director of SmilePod in London. I've seen a lot of practices and hopefully I've seen most things out there, and we're keen to work with you if you're looking to develop your practice or just have a question on what you can do, then please reach out and we'll see what we can do to help you. So that really brings us to a conclusion of today, and it's really over to you now with any questions. If you do have some questions, then if you'd like to just put them in the notes, I shall read them out and either attempt to answer them myself or pass them to Sunita, who's still with us, and then we shall wrap things up after that. So if I can see any questions, then please feel free to ask away. I'm going to stop sharing this screen now. And let's see if any questions come in. Don't be shy. This is the point where lots of people go quiet now. So let's see if anything comes in.
I do just want to point out that as far as the CQC is concerned, we've just been informed today that the portal is going to be available to pretty much everybody. So do look out for that. If you haven't already registered with CQC for their updates or newsletters, do that. And just make sure that on your actual registration page, you have your details updated so that they can contact you with details of how to get onto the portal, how to start logging things on, all kinds of things. So do please look out for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Sunita. Any questions, anyone?
I know it's an awkward sort of thing to do, really. So if you do have any HR questions, I know those are things that people don't really want to put in a chat box. So if you do have questions that you need to ask that you are a bit too shy to ask now, you can always email me or Derek. Derek can always just forward the email on to me as well. So please do that if you feel there's an issue that needs to be dealt with.
I'll certainly email everybody tomorrow, thanking your attendance and giving contact details and a link to this if you want to go back and watch it. I'll just ask a question, Sunita, whilst you're on. So obviously you train practice managers. What would you say that is the sort of number one point or number one frustration that practice managers come to you and ask you about when it comes to sort of HR and performance there?
Well, it's really the main thing is that as a consultant, what ends up happening is that practice managers and dentists usually come to me when they have reached the end of their tether with somebody. So where they might have been having performance related issues for a while, they might have thought, oh, well, I'll deal with it some other time, or it'll go away, or you know, just basically brushing it under the carpet, and then it gets to a stage where it's just gotten too bad. It's affecting the whole team. The conduct is just it has become sort of cheeky or too repetitive, or just basically making the rest of the team inefficient. So they usually come to me to sort it out. By which stage it's got to a stage where there's maybe a little bit too much animosity between the parties, and then all really the practice owner wants to do is to get rid of the staff member, and there's sort of a process that they want to go down to sort of terminate the contract. But with all these things that I've been talking about today, with things like team building, with dealing with issues just when they come up, rather than leaving them or letting them just fester, by having a sort of a better way of managing performance, so actually having chats, having informal chats, and having formal disciplinary procedures at an early stage, is a much better way of managing performance in the long run, because it doesn't mean that you only have a disciplinary hearing when things have gotten really bad. It's actually something that you can use at a very early stage. So if someone is constantly late, and you have told them a number of times, look, you know, you're 5 minutes late, you're 5 minutes late, you're 5 minutes late, eventually, just by saying that is not enough, then you become annoyed, and then you start maybe having a sulk with that person, or other people are having sulks with that person because they're always late. But if you actually just follow the formal disciplinary procedure, it's all there in writing. It then just means that if in future you do need to follow that through, and there are other performance related issues, you can follow through the disciplinary procedure. And then ultimately, if you do need to terminate the person's contract, it's done in a much easier way, because otherwise what tends to happen is a staff member's contract may be terminated, but there might be issues where the employee claims discrimination for the way that you've terminated their contract. So they might raise the issue of race discrimination or sex discrimination or disability discrimination, even though that wasn't the reason for your for why you terminated the contract. It was because they kept coming in late. But it's because you haven't actually used the performance related process to make it clear that that's why you're terminating the contract. It can lead to all sorts of other issues, and the possibility of employment tribunals, and the threat of employment tribunals, which a lot of employees are using as a method of getting money out of people, because they know that is actually a possibility. So I think that's probably one of the biggest issues, and really my whole aim with the practice management is to kind of give practice managers and the employers their tools in order to create a better team. Because there are tools out there. It's just that you need to know how to use them properly, and you need to be assertive in using them. But unfortunately, most practice managers don't have the knowledge, and they don't have the training to be able to use these tools, or even know that they're there. Even things like recruitment, how to actually recruit properly in the first place is a very important thing, because obviously once you recruit right, that follows through for the rest of the person's career. So recruitment is a big issue as well, and spending time on recruitment. So I train on that as well. So those are the main issues, really.
Lovely.
But I mean, there's a plethora of things
Yes.
that people have to deal with. So it's not an easy one. But
Super. Okay. And any questions from anyone else before we wrap up this evening? No. Okay. I don't see anything coming through. So once again, thank you, Sunita, for your time. Thank you all for your attendance tonight. I will, as I've already said, send out an email to everybody tomorrow, just thanking you again and giving you links to the presentation and links to the video. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Sunita, whose contact details will be on the email. And once again, thank you. Have a good night. and enjoy. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.